Pagbati sa inyo mga kapatid at mga kaibigan sa pangalan ng ating Panginoong Hesukristo. Sa pagpapatuloy ng ating pag-aaral sa Christian Holiness sa ating Sunday School, tayo pa rin ay nasa paksa ng means of grace o mga kasangkapan ng biyaya na itinitindig natin sa prinsipyo that God supplies graces, but He ordinarily uses ordained means to activate the Spirit and the Word and the process that we have been familiar with, starting with the goal to be holy. Inaalam natin ang mga kasalanan na dapat patayin, mga biyayang dapat linangin, at ang mga pamantayan na dapat nating ipamuhay. Para makumpleto yan ay kailangan natin ng mga kasangkapan ng biyaya. So execution of means completes the cycle. At sa pag-aaral natin ng means of grace, tiningnan natin ang private means at corporate means. Tayo ay nasa corporate means at napag-aralan natin ang sacraments. Tayo ay dumadako ngayon sa means ng discipline. Muli nating ilagay ito sa konteksto ng Reformed theology of the marks of the church sa isang iglesia. Para siya masabing totoong iglesia, nararapat ang ilang mga sangkap, at ang pinakamahalagang sangkap ay ang essential mark na proclamation of the word and particularly of the gospel. With this, a church can claim to be a true church. However, there are two maintaining marks. Ang una ay ang administration of the sacraments na siya nating pinag-aralan na, at ang ikalawa na siya nating sisimulang pag-aralan ngayon ay ang exercise of discipline. Bakit natin pinag-iba ang kategorya ng mga marka ng iglesia? Because a church may be true at one time without the maintaining marks, but without the maintaining marks, a church will not perpetuate for generations. So nakita natin ang sacraments at titingnan natin ngayon ay ang church discipline. Now I understand that many times, perhaps in more than 90% of cases, when we think of church discipline, we think of its association with the negative, the corrective. But actually the first factor of church discipline is positive. It is formative discipline, which is the positive dimension of discipline. Positibo ang layo ng disiplina sa iglesia. Kung yung titingnan, discipline is rooted in the same word as discipling. So we want disciples in the church. Ginagawa natin ito sa dalawang paraan. There is the teacher's duty to minister the word for discipling. Kung matatandaan ninyo ang ating Great Commission, ang ikatlong participle na tinignan natin dyan ay sa verse 20, teaching them, those who are baptized, who are disciples, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So nariyan ang pagtuturo na siyang nagpapalago sa pagkaalagad ng isang mananampalataya. Kasama yan sa disiplina. That is why even today, when we talk of subjects in school, we call them discipline, academic discipline, because discipline at its very root is teaching. At yan ang positibong marka ng disiplina sa iglesia. Pero kasama din dyan ang members' duty to instruct and admonish one another. Ang disiplina ng pagpapalago ng pagkaalagad ay tungkulin ng lahat ng mga miyembro. Makailang ulit ko na rin ginamit ang Romans 15:14. I myself am convinced, my brothers and sisters, that you yourself are full of goodness, filled with knowledge, competent to instruct one another. So, wag nating tingnan ang pagtuturo na from above to below, from the teacher to the hearers. Kailangan tingnan natin na mayroong mutuality and reciprocity of teaching going on in the church. And this is the first aspect of church discipline. And why is this important? Because positive discipling is the foundation and for prevention of corrective discipline. Kaya ano man ang mapag-usapan natin sa corrective discipline, ilagay natin sa pundasyon ng positibo na pagpapalago ng pagkaalagad ng mga mananampalataya sa iglesia. But of course, when we talk of discipline, we understand that in most cases we do mean corrective discipline, and that is what we will focus upon in our study of this means of grace. Corrective discipline is the application of measured censure for restoration. Some churches fail to exercise discipline with wrong justification. May mga iglesyang hindi nagdidisiplina at kung minsan pinangangatwiranan nila ito, may dalawang malimit na pangangatwiran. Ang una ay wala silang confession of faith, wala silang covenant of duties para maging miyembro ng iglesia, and when you do not have confession, then you have nothing to measure teachings by. When you have no covenant, you have nothing to measure moral behavior by of members. Para sa atin, kinakailangan ng confession of faith. Hindi ibig sabihin na pumapantay ito sa Biblia, pero kailangan yan, at kailangan rin ng church covenant, kaya meron tayong pareho niyan sa ating iglesia. Meron namang iba na ang pangangatwiran nila ay ibinabatay nila sa salita ng Diyos, na sinasabi nilang the church must accept both wheat and tares. Now, obviously, they are basing this on Jesus' parable of the wheat and tares, kung saan sinabi niyang huwag silang sabay anihin, palaguin silang pareho na magkasama. At iniisip nila na ang tinutukoy ni Jesus ay sa iglesia, but Jesus himself gave the interpretation of the parable of the wheat and tares, and just going to the interpretation of Jesus in Matthew 13 verse 38, he made it very clear, the field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. So, hindi iglesia kung saan sabay na pinalalago ang wheat and tares, kundi ang tinutukoy niya ay sa mundo. Hanggat hindi dumarating ang huling araw ng paghuhukom, talagang magkasama, kahit sa trabaho natin, kasama natin ay mga hindi mananampalataya, yan ang tamang application. So, mixture of wheat and tares is in the world, that is not to be tolerated in the church. So, this is a wrong justification for not exercising discipline. Failure in church discipline will compromise the genuineness of the church in generations, as we saw in our consideration of the marks of the church. This is a maintaining mark to perpetuate the identity of the church for generations to come. So, ilang katanungan ang ating sasagutin. And for this lesson, there is only one question that we can answer, and that question is, where is the authority of discipline derived? Now, this is sometimes called in theology the power of key. Ang kapangyarihan o autoridad ng susi, nakabatay ito sa salita ng Panginoon sa kay Apostol Pedro. Now, this is the error to avoid. Wherever the derivation of authority of discipline may be, it is wrong to find that outside of the church. Finding the authority outside the church is wrong. Again, may dalawang kaparaanan ito nangyayari. Una ay ang tinatawag na Erastian, taken from the company of Ulrich Zwingli, the reformer, Thomas Erastus, and probably he did not teach fully what many Lutherans now are practicing in terms of the Erastian form of discipline. This holds that discipline belongs to the government. So the police power of government, the court system, at hindi ang iglesia mismo ang nagdidisiplina, kundi ipinapaubaya sa pamahalaan. At ito'y mali sapagkat maliwanag ang pagtuturo ni Pablo kung saan nagkaroon ng ganito sa Corinto. Ang sinabi niya sa 1 Corinthians 6:1 and 2, dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to law before the unrighteous and not before the saints? Do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world will be judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matter? No, may mga nag-aakala ng ibig sabihin nito ay ang mga maliliit na bagay lamang ang dapat na pangasawaan ng disiplina sa iglesia, ang malalaking bagay ay sa pamahalaan na. Maling pagbasa yan ng salita ng Diyos. Ang sinasabi ay kung kaya ninyo ang mga maliliit na bagay na para sa mundo, ay kaya ninyo ang mga bagay na malalaki sapagkat hahatulan ninyo ang mundo. Sa makatuwid, ang mga bagay na nagiging sigalot sa mga kapatiran ay dapat ilagay sa iglesia, hindi sa pamahalaan. ang mga nagpipilit na pamahalaan ng humatol ay itinatanggi ang pamamahala ni Jesucristo sa iglesia. Another reason for finding or locating authority outside of the local church is when there is a denominational structure. Dito, the denominational authorities are considered above the local church. And of course, this is exemplified in a recent case by the United Methodist Church, which adopted a same-sex policy, and walang magawa ang mga lokal nilang iglesia. Either umalis ka sa denomination pero walang makapagdisiplina doon sa mga nakatataas. Ganyan ang nangyayari sa denominational structure, nagiging pang-alipin sa mga lokal na iglesia. At ang tamang dapat nating tingnan ay saan ibinigay ang susi ng autoridad sa iglesia. Pag sinabi mong susi, susi para magpapasok, susi para magpalabas ng iglesia. Originally, this was given to Peter, but later on extended to all the apostles. Originally given to Peter when Peter made the confession to Jesus that he was the Son of God. Jesus responded to him that he will build his church upon this rock, and then he said in verse 19, I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Now take note of the language. So it's about admitting, it is about releasing by the power of the key. But now we will find this extended to all the apostles in another passage in Matthew 18:19. Again, I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything you ask for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. So kung ito ang original para sa mga apostol, ano nang ibig sabihin ngayon para sa iglesia? We no longer have apostles, but without the apostles, that authority now resides in the New Testament. At yan ay nakabatay sa katotohanan ng iglesia ay nakatindig sa pundasyon ng mga apostol at mga propeta. It is built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets according to Ephesians 2 and verse 20, and therefore disciplinary measure must have New Testament basis applied to an offender in order to have legitimate discipline. And 1 Corinthians 5, Apostle Paul gives this instruction in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, when you are gathered together along with my spirit. So Paul could not be present, but there must be the apostolic spirit. And for us now, it is no longer a person, but the word of the apostle that should be present with us when we have to exercise discipline. So we cannot discipline on the basis of cultural or temperamental norms. Kung ayaw mo dahil mali sa kultura o ayaw mo dahil hindi mo gusto sa iyong personalidad, hindi ka pwede magdisiplina ng dahil doon. Kinakailangan na anumang disiplina ang gawin sa iglesia ay may autoridad ng apostol dahil sila ang unang binigyan ng susi, pero ang susi na iyan ay nakapaloob na sa bagong tipan na siyang ginagamit ngayon ng iglesia. All discipline must be by New Testament standard. So, what are the authorized agents that we have in the exercise of discipline? Now, there are different degrees of offenses which will call for structured agencies. And there are three structured agencies of discipline in the church that I want us to consider. The first is ministerial jurisdiction. Merong pinagkalooban ang pastor, ang ministro ng iglesia ng kanyang nasasakupang autoridad na kung may paglabag doon ay maaring siya mismo ay kumilos para sa pagdisiplina. Ito ay may kinalaman partikular sa mga bagay ng pagtuturo. Issues of false teaching and sowing division because of false teaching or falsehood that is circulated, that is something that falls within the jurisdiction of the minister. So it does not have to be made public, A minister can exercise discipline because the minister is the teaching authority in the church. As official teacher, the minister determines the teaching agenda. We see this in the way Apostle Paul gives Timothy that mission in sending him to Ephesus in 1 Timothy 1:3, as I sought you to abide still at Ephesus when I went into Macedonia, that you might charge some that they teach no other doctrine. Now, this word that he gave to Timothy to charge is a word of authority. He simply need not request, hindi lang ito pakiusap, kundi gumagamit siya ng autoridad, sabihan kung anong hindi maaring ituro, at siya ang magpapasya kung ano ang maaring ituro. So here you have ministerial jurisdiction when it comes to the teaching in the church. So there should be censure that can be applied by the minister on those who are causing division because they are circulating teaching that is contrary to what the Bible teaches. And of course, this is aided by the commonly held confession of faith of the church. You can define what is the wrong doctrine that is causing division. So Romans 16:17 makes that warning. I urge you, brothers and sisters, to watch out for those who cause divisions and put obstacles in your way that are contrary to the teaching you have learned. Keep away from them. And then in 1 Timothy 6:3 and 4, if anyone teaches otherwise and does not consent to wholesome words, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and to the doctrine which accords with godliness, he is proud, knowing nothing, etc. What this shows is that it becomes the minister's duty to exercise censure because he is protecting the church, the flock, from being compromised in its teaching. Failure of censure exposes the church to unholiness. So ministerial censure, however, this is a warning, can erode into authoritarianism. This is the case of Diotrephes in 3 John 9 and 10, na gumawa siya ng sarili niyang pagdidisiplina na hindi batay sa mga turo ng apostol, kundi batay lang sa kanyang interes na panatilihin ang kanyang otoridad. So it is true, authoritarianism is a bane that happens in many churches, but that does not remove the fact that a minister has a jurisdiction when it comes to teaching. Kaya doon nga mahalaga na may confession of faith so that even the members can tell a pastor whether he is going contrary to the confession of faith. So, with these different degrees of offenses, the first is the ministerial jurisdiction. There is secondly, official recognition. Ito'y may kinalaman na ang mga officers na hindi lang ang elders but even the deacons. There are issues beyond the ministerial but not yet publicly open and does not need to be opened in public to the church. There is a private offense that does not fall into a teaching issue, therefore not necessarily pastoral jurisdiction, but still officers can get involved. And this is implicit, though not clearly mandated, but implicit in the calling of arbiters when there is a moral conduct to be addressed. The censure by official action without public report. We see this in Matthew 18:16 after the one-on-one. If he will not hear, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of two or three witnesses every word may be established. Now, presumably, the ones who will arbitrate are considered to be objective and wise. Hindi naman yan magtatawag ng kaibigan ng offender, kaibigan ng offended, at maglalabo-labo sila roon. Kundi ang tatawagin ay ang makapagbibigay ng mahusay na patotoo, and that normally the officers will fill that role. Then, offenses are meant to be kept private as much as possible. This is the reason. This is the point of Matthew 18. That is why it begins with one-on-one, that when it is settled one-on-one, it does not need to expand further, and then one and arbiters, when that is settled, it does not need to expand further, because the interest is to keep an offense private, because you want to keep the reputation of a brother or a sister, no matter that the person is an offender, that the reputation be safeguarded. Now dito, bilang babala, the offended can be guilty of making public a private offense sa kanyang hinanakit, at siguro sa pagkakatisod niya ay basta na ibubulalas niya kung kanino para lamang saktan ang nanakit sa kanya. Ay hindi ganyan ang diwang Kristiyano. Kinakailangan ng pananatili ng lihim, ng pagkapribado ng mga sigalot hanggat maari ito ay maipagkasundo. That is the point of the private confrontation. It is for the purpose of reconciliation. It runs contrary to the intention of reconciliation between the parties, to make it open when it is not open. 1 Corinthians 6:5, this is Paul's rebuke again of the Corinthians in the same context we read earlier. I speak to your shame. Is it so that there is not a wise man among you? No, not one that shall be able to judge between his brethren. Now you see here, Paul expects that there are wise men, men whose wisdom are recognized. If that is the case, then you see here implicit the use and the active involvement of officers, so that a matter of censure without making it public can become official in the case of offenders. Official discipline is administering censure without making it public. In fact, we should be careful not to make it public as much as possible. But then there is that third agency, and that is congregational imposition. This is the case where issues of public offenses involving the church must now be addressed. There are matters that are brought to the church after exhausting the process. Nakita natin yan sa Matthew 18 na magsimula sa one-on-one, then one and arbiters, for the purpose of not making it public. But even that passage contemplates on the possibility that it will not be settled even there. But the idea is exhaust all the possibilities to keep it private. When it can no longer be kept private, that's when it should be told to the church. And when it is told to the church, there is nothing beyond the church in exercising discipline. Maliwanag again sa Matthew 18. Now, that means for the church must exercise utmost carefulness before issuing any final verdict, realizing that we are dealing with finality in the matter of discipline, especially as we will study later when it is excommunication. Then we should exhaust all means, and when we do have to make a final verdict, we should have a clear conscience that we are doing it only with the utmost carefulness. Matthew 18:17 tells us, if he, the offender, refuses to listen to them, this is now the offended and the arbiters, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Again, we'll study this more when we come to excommunication. But you see here that there is nothing beyond the judgment of the church. The church is the final authority. So if you weigh all these agencies, structured agencies of authority, it is neither democratic na congregation lang ang nagpapasya ng lahat, nagsisimula sa congregation, natatapos sa congregation. But neither is this authoritarian, na nagsisimula at natatapos sa officers. As we can see, there is a gradation, a structure of authority for the exercise of the power of the key, because it now resides in the New Testament. Kaya sa usapin ng disiplina, muli, mag-ingat tayo sa ating pag-iisip. Ang tamang pag-iisip ay ituring natin that church discipline is for my formative discipleship so that I can be holy. That's the positive way of thinking. So, I will respect the structure of authority in place in my church for exercise of correction, beginning with ministerial jurisdiction, official recognition, and congregational imposition. You respect that structure of authority, and when discipline does have to be exercised, ang tamang response ay I will by God's grace seek to follow the gradation of censure, always seeking privacy and restoration hanggat maaari panatilihing pribado at ang layunin ay may pagkasundo ang mga nagkakasigalot ng mga kapatiran. Ang maling pag-iisip ay isipin na I see church discipline is as a scary feature of church life that I wish need not be exercised. So para sa kanya ay nakakatakot na sangkap ng buhay iglesia ang pagdidisiplina, at kung magkaroon siya ng rebeldeng diwa, ang magiging ugali niya ay I will not let the authority of the church to constrain me from doing what looks good to me. So this is individualistic, selfish thinking na walang pakialam sa autoridad ng iglesia. Ang ganyang pag-iisip hindi mauuwi sa kabanalan. Kaya ang hamon ko sa lahat, recognize the authority in the church for discipline, always remembering that this is for the purpose of our holiness, at unahin natin ang formative discipline for our discipling, and when corrective discipline has to be exercised, it is for the purpose of helping one another to be holy, to correct where there is need for correction, and not to broadcast something that still need to be private, and therefore recognize that there is that gradation of authority structure in the church that must be in place, and all for the purpose that we can be holy, para tayo maging banal. Maraming salamat sa inyong pakikinig. Sana kayo ay nakinabang at muli pagpalain kayo mula sa pag-ibig ng Ama, sa biyaya ng kanyang anak na si Jesucristo, at sa pakikipisan ng banal na Espiritu.